Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, we're talking storytelling and film, and delighted to be talking with writer, director Elizabeth Musgrave. May I call you Elizabeth?
Or Beth. I go by Beth.
Beth.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hmm.
many thanks for joining. Delighted to be talking
Uh-huh.
about storytelling through movie making and those sort of processes. And delighted to be talking about the project Womanhood, which I know is currently on Kickstarter. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So delighted to be talking about that project, its development, and anything that you want listeners to know about that. But by means of a first invitation sort of question, what connected you with film and storytelling initially?
Um, and I like that question. Well, I'm from a family of storytellers. I mean, we were just briefly talked about Appalachia, and my from that area is very much storytelling, as you know. So I feel that I got a lot from my grandmother and her
Hmm.
sisters, and they would tell these incredible stories that I mean, they never left a holler, as they say, and it would be the most interesting stories and these people, and they never left. And I thought, how do they tell that story? So I think maybe that might have been that little spark that I like. How do they make it so interesting? How do the mundane, the ordinary, just extraordinary? And so
Hmm.
from that, with the writing, I started off, I didn't know, I was kind of meandering in college, and I majored in every liberal arts, from philosophy to women's studies to, everything. And finally, I reached into my credits, and my advisor said, you've got to pick a major. You're collecting all these credits, and I was like, okay. And I'm like, what do I have the most of? And she was like, English. So I said, okay, English. I'll major in English. So
Hmm. Hmm.
but I had never had any creative writing. I had just all done the literature based and everything. So I wanted to graduate. The next year, and I don't know why, because I didn't have anything to do, but I knew the head of the department, and on the English department, and he said, I there was this one class I need, and he said, well, I will just um, I can substitute a playwriting class for this other class you needed that I couldn't. I'm like, so I'm sold. I had never taken any kind of, like I said, I'd written bad poetry, or, in high school, or I'd lamented over something, I'm sure a bad song, or I wrote, just whatever, but I'd never done any theater kind of thing. So from that point, I think that was, I took the playwriting with having nothing, just to get me through that class that I needed. And and it was there. We had to write this little 10-minute, not even a 10-minute, it was like a two-pager of little play, a little dialogue or whatever. And I never even thought about writing dialogue. And I'm like, oh, people do write the dialogue. And I mean, I was always loved movies, but I never been in theater until I think in college, I saw my first play. But so when I wrote that little, two-pager or three-pager, I was like, I'm thinking that yeah, it's important what you say, but it's most important what you don't say. And I learned
Hmm.
that, later on you call the subtext or whatever. But I learned that little thing that I'm like, I'm going to do everything but not say what it is. And then we read it because we had actors in the class, and I was hooked. And so from there, that playwriting class, I had a wonderful teacher, Elliot Wasserman, who's now retired. He used to direct a lot of the New Harmony plays in Indiana, and a playwright himself, and he's absolutely just fabulous. And he was the one who like pushed me to do this whole thing of, you know, and he's like, but you need to get you need to have a body of work. So he's like, I
Hmm.
know some people from University of Georgia. That's where he went. And I think you could get into there. So I did. I had one play that I'd written, and he sent it off, and I was like, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. And they're like, you got an assistantship, come on down. And I worked that way. I mean, I started off in, film was not my area. It was dialogue. And I
Mhm.
started off in theater, but I never, but I always loved the word because that was so fascinating to me. And then, so when my second year at grad school, I switched to screenwriting. And I was still
Nice.
focused though, yeah, on the word. But, I hadn't really used the image yet. But I was mainly just talk. I was very Tarantino oriented, very, I mean, I
Mhm.
loved all the writers that started off in theater, like Patty Chayefsky, you know, um, Richard Matheson. I loved a lot of that started off on Twilight Zones or theater or started writing for that. And then I just kind of just said, okay, I'm doing the image. I love Shakespeare. I love all of really gotten into the image yet and so from graduate school, I did that. And then I had a friend in LA who was she was a junior agent out here. And I
Mhm.
like, I know I want to go. I want to, because everybody from Georgia was moving to New York. They were all going to go into theater. And I just kind of said, I want to do film because that's where I really felt like I could do it. And then I moved out in 97 and it was just, I've been here ever since.
Nice, nice. Well, the play is called Womanhood, a Trilogy. I'm curious about the creative spark behind this film project and behind what you're exploring with it. How did this project come to be?
Well, it was just one because it was based on the three stages of womanhood. So you have maiden, mother, crone.
Hmm.
And for women, a lot of our alone time is in the bathroom for any number of reasons, but you can be alone in the bathroom, just give me 5 minutes, I'll go. But a lot of things happen. Our most intimate secrets or different things are in that bathroom. And I knew I wanted to write something around a bathroom and not,
Hmm.
I think Neil Simon did it. He did some things like Plaza Suite, and I remember like there's one where the daughter is like stuck in the bathroom. But anyway, but I want to do something around that. And so I started off with Mother was really because it was really more closer to me. So I had this idea years ago of Mother, and that's when I started using more of the image. The lead does not say anything.
Hmm.
And until the end is that because it's also more powerful if you withhold it and you have that one thing that you're going to say. So I didn't want I'm like now I'm totally like using my image with because I feel like the less you say is it's just like if you're directing you conserve your energy and the one who's always saying the most spends the most energy and is always the weakest, so you want to be conserve that to be strong. And
Hmm.
so I really like the idea of her not saying anything, that we just see it in her. But for me, to go back years ago, I was going through fertility treatments and I would spend a lot of time by myself out. And when you're going through fertility treatments, you're hormonal anyway because you're pumped up through all these drugs and all of the stuff. And but you also everything is just exacerbated at that point, everything. And I mean, one little sound and you're just like, oh, you just feel like you're bloated, you're stuffed, you're everything. Everything is just, and you don't connect with anyone. It's very isolating. You feel like everybody around you is getting pregnant and you're like, oh,
Hmm.
right, everybody, so I spent a lot of time by myself, and there was a storm drain out where I work, and I would think, I wonder if somebody, because you hear all of these people discarding their, prom babies, or you hear one different. I'm like, what if somebody had discarded something around that? sewer, that storm drain. And I would think
Mhm.
about that, and I would just obsess on my like breaks. And I would just think about, is there something I could kind of catch myself looking at it, and thinking about like who, and that's where I had the idea of mother. That was years ago, but I never even put it into, never even thought about doing it until probably last year.
Mhm.
I thought it's time to do it. And then when that came, I'm like, when I was writing that, then I'm like, well, this makes sense of my other, because I was again, a women's studies major, I was every major. But I'm like, oh, I could do these three because I'm very familiar with, now crone. I'm into that part of my life. I'm the crone. But I looked at that and I thought each of these can also, I wanted, as I was writing it, can express visually these parts in our life. Where Act
Mhm.
One in Maiden it's the more stable. I'm making it very general, very generic. It's very practical magic. It's about because they're all horror based or horror comedies, um, and this is with Callie, the main the character. She's her into womanhood. She's beginning her stage into woman. It's a family of witches, and it's
Mhm.
more like practical magic, hocus pocus. Very light, but it has the Wiccan influences and it has all of that. And you're dealing with it. And I said, I don't want anything crazy. Um, but it is a coming of age story, and she's little friends with her little boy next door, and where they're going in their lives at this point. And I want it warm,
Mhm.
the colors warm to show all of that. So, and then second act, I wanted to be, that's the most tumultuous. I wanted to be erratic. I wanted the sound to be jarring. I wanted it to be very, the angles to be, uh, you know, just, composition. I wanted to focus on different things, and that didn't, it wasn't straightforward.
Mhm.
Everything was off. And, and then, the crone is when we reflect back on our lives, more or less. That's the time and the most dramatic. And so that's I want to shoot in black and white. So we're shooting the bulk of that in black and white on
Yeah.
that one. So as far as like, I feel like now, like I'm like, oh, now I can use the image, but the word in expressing that, finally it took me all these years, because I mean, I love dialogue. I love a good monologue and a dialogue and all of those things. So, but this one also, oh, okay, I can express that. And that's the way I went with this and how that's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in terms of production, where are you in the production process?
So we're in post, we are editing. We're doing Mother right now because we want to premiere at Monsterpalooza because it
Mhm.
has more horror elements, and my husband's in the he's he's very much horror. He does comic books. He goes to, Comic-Con. He's a bit, all the conventions, but we want to go to Monsterpalooza because that's a big scene, but I think this might be the first year they're having a film festival. So I'd like to premiere there, because it is not it's not splatter or gore, but it does have some effects.
Mhm.
It, but you don't see the monster. We call it sewer. I call it sewer baby, but you never see you see it. But the imagination I felt like was that was more to it than, because sometimes when you see a monster, you're like, oh, I'm disappointed. Why did they have to show that? So, but my husband made this monster, kind of this bulbous thing but you do see part of it, but you don't see the full thing. Just the umbilical cord that that does that. So, on that. So that's where we are. But
Yeah.
all of them are filmed. We're all done. We have a rough copy of a draft or a version of Maiden, And then I haven't even looked at the footage of Crone. I mean, it's just been because I've been shooting one a month since January. And then we had the
Oh
fires
wow.
out here in January. I'm from
Hmm.
LA, so we had hit with those fires, and that just crazy. And that when I did my first film that I wrote years ago, um, Sound Man, it was COVID. I shot the last, it was in the end of February, the last weekend, and then it was, March. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I didn't need pickups for anything. But I
Yeah.
had just
Wow.
written that one. And then this one was the fires. I'm like, okay, this is, I hope, but I did it. Then I did February. So we got through that one and we did Crone in February, and the Mother was shot in March because it was the shortest script, but it was the most complicated because we dealt with a couple of locations and outdoors and
Hmm.
special effects. But it was only 6 pages, but it was the most complicated.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah.
It's an interesting mixture of genres, horror and comedy. Uh, what draws you to those particular aesthetics?
Well, I think they're both cathartic in all those ways. They are very
Hmm.
much. Um, I mean, I've always been drawn to horror, even as a child. I mean, I remember one of my first films. I was loved Dracula. That was my
Hmm.
thing. And then, my first film that I remember going to was a drive-in seeing Blackula,
Yeah.
and with
Yeah.
great William Marshall, and 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 I was always into that. And even when Kiss came out, I loved putting on makeup, and I'm like, oh, they're just so, and you had I just was, so I was always drawn to horror. And and then in the 80s, it was bad VHS, but then I kind of got away from it. Um, and I wasn't so much into it. And now I'm more so drawn into it. And even like the movies that like Strange Darling.
Hmm.
That was
Hmm.
something that was one on my top list. Um, Titan or anything or Revenge or Raw. So these are things, but I think it's because it always gives me a response of something.
Yeah.
Um, and and I guess it's come back to theater too. You can't have the comedy without the tragedy or the tragedy without the comedy. And I feel like horror is right there, you know.
Yeah.
And then with the comedy, so that's why I have, yeah, it feels very natural to me.
Yeah. Yeah. What does filmmaking allow you to do in terms of telling story?
Well, I think like I was telling you, like with the visual, I
Hmm.
hadn't really taken into that because I love the dialogue and I love theater. In the last few years, I've been doing Fringe Fest. And so I've been back in the theater these last 2 years, and because I love that. But with film, I hadn't, I think with again, I go to Mother, what you can do with the image. And I mean, and I hadn't really used that in terms because I was thinking from a writer, but this I decided I was going to direct because last year my husband and I co-directed a stage play, and that was the first time I'm like, and that kind of gave me that courage. I'm like, you know what, I'm doing it.
Hmm.
I'm going to do it this time. And so I did. We decided, and I think with that, I mean, you look at all, like Citizen Kane, and you look at the imagery of something like that, Rosebud, or you see all the things, or you see some imagery of what can happen. But now I really, what I'm using that, um, how important, how you can do, because when I know, in graduate school, we would always they always told us to avoid voiceovers because we're like, don't tell us what you're seeing on the, screen. And that's what, right, that's what newbies kind of want to do. They want to like tell you. They want to show you what you're doing. Oh, and I'm walking it, and as I'm like, but the one who probably going to cancel myself, but the one who always did it so great was Woody Allen, and and
Hmm.
Annie Hall, or doing different things that went against what you're seeing. So I learned, even so when I was doing that, I'm like, okay, I know if I'm going to do a voiceover, I do not want it to match the image. So
Hmm.
would you know, that I've consciously, I'm like, you can't do something, or else just don't have a voiceover. If you're going to show me, why am I narrating something and just showing you? It's got to be something that's totally opposite of that. So I think that's what I always learned from that. So as far as like, with Woody Allen, when I would look at him, I'm like, oh, he's great when he does that, in Annie Hall, or he does it and he uses that in another one. But, um, so I think as I'm getting, older, I mean, like as you're younger, you think, oh, it's always like the dialogue is so important, and not that I don't appreciate Quentin Tarantino and a lot of that, but it's just like that, 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 that. But whereas, you got talking heads. I mean, and I do like, I like When Harry Met Sally, and I do like a lot of the talking head. I love Nora Ephron, but as far as like, are you using the film and the way of doing that? And I think that's what I've learned as I got older. I'm like, you really have to, if you're going to do film, give me a reason. Like with Crone, I got to have a reason. Why am I shooting in black and white? And I have to have, and for that part with Crone, it was it was my lead is 83. My lead star in Maiden was, I thought she was 10, found out she was 9. And then so she was
Hmm.
and then my next lead was 83, but she's a young 83, but she's actually playing 75 in the film. But she finds out she's, again, like all three of these start off in a bathroom, and there's whether or not you're starting your period, or or the horror of blood. Um,
Hmm.
and so at 75, she knows she's not, menstruating. She's diagnosed with uterine or ovarian cancer. And so she goes home, and this woman, so she sees or the character sees the photo of her and her mother. And it's black and white, her as a teen, and then her mother, which we photoshopped. We found a picture of Sherry, who's the lead, who's 15 years old in this picture, and we photoshopped the other lead who plays the mother. We had her dress and everything because she comes out of that picture. So she's
Oh,
going to
wow.
come
Yeah.
out of the picture because we find out that she died when she was a teen of cancer. And so here it's coming back. So she's looking at, when she looks at the photo, then of course, she goes back and she, falls asleep, falls asleep. And when she wakes up, she's in black and white, and it's her mother, telling her to get up, ready for go to school, So for that, I'm like, I want the black and white. Now I know why you would do a black and white, not just for, like, yeah, it does look great because we filmed if you shot that in color, the paint is just all chipped. It's a studio. We had a studio, the bedroom, and you could it's a really cool place because you could shoot. They have jail cells or the courtroom and different things, and then they have a bedroom where you could use. So we use that, but it's so dinged up. But when you shoot it in black and white, it looks pretty darn good, So we were like, wow, what the black and white? So that was a blessing in that sense. But I knew my uh, purpose, and um, that I wanted black and whites. Um, and that's another thing. I always think that things should have a purpose. You've got to have a reason behind it. You can't just
Hmm.
show it just because, yeah, it looks good but what is the reasoning for that? And I think as I get older, I just feel like, there's got to be a reason, just tell me, whereas I'm more forgiving and more, younger, I was like, oh, okay, just fun. You can have, now I think that everything has to have meaning or purpose because you realize how short life is, and, and,
Hmm.
and every second is important, how you spend your time, and what you it's a clock on everything in so many ways, and but it gets even louder as when your parents are gone and even your peers now you start to hear about them or it's like,
Hmm.
oh, it's like the mortality and I guess of what you want to leave behind. Not that, I mean, with we never did have children, so that whole thing, but it's not that you can't create,
Hmm.
it's you can still create and it's what that now is important, of what am I leaving behind for others to see or that little, you know, thumbprint of me, or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Those questions of life in film is just one of the great ways to think about that and to reflect on some of those questions.
Yeah, and I think it's how you change because it's interesting because when I wrote the one film I did, Sound Man, I wrote that it was 20 years and that was now it's 25, but at the time it had been 20 years and I had just met my husband at the time, but I was in my I think I was a 30 young 30 31 at the time. I was looking and there's the comedy and the tragedy where this is where it comes in. So so when I wrote the play and it was it did pretty well as a 10-minute play festival thing. Um, the lead actress was in her 20s and she really focused on the comedy aspect and the physical comedy. It was much more of a Lucille Ball kind of physical comedy thing. So it's basically it's an ornithologist who has come and she's found this. She's taken pictures of this rare bird that no one has ever seen, and so the people, the audience is supposed to be the who's come to see about this bird, and she's as she's going through her her presentation, she realizes it's all of her personal photos. It's her life up there and so and then everybody just starts no one cares and she's been lonely and everything and then her whole life and sound man is and again he doesn't say anything, he's the strong person, he's the one who always is gesture mic and the feedback and he's always there um but you could take sound man as different ways but he's always the one. But the actress was young and I was young and I was looking through everything through the comedy. So
Hmm.
flash forward 20 years later, the you know I'm approaching 50. The lead is in her 40s and you she focused on the tragedy and it just hit a nerve and I was like there's three things I had to change in that 20-year one. It was I had to use a PowerPoint rather than a slide projector. And I always like that because I like the sound of it, when it blasts
Hmm.
in your face but there's only three things I had to change to update it. And the one was tech and a couple other things. The impact of it was and I saw it so differently because of my age and
Hmm.
and we focused and it was the tragedy. Emily was great, the lead of this one on the film, but she didn't do she did some physical, but it wasn't nearly the focus of getting to the tragedy of loneliness and isolation and looking for a meaning in your life.
Yeah. Well, if I'm a listener out there and if I want to see more about the film, if I want to see more about your work, where can I go to get more information, support?
Oh gosh, well, we have a Kickstarter which might be over by the time this comes up, but we also I think that there's a sound man. I'm terrible with social media. I'm not even on social media. Um, but there's a sound man on Instagram. You can find O'Sally Productions. So OH Sally Productions. I could get a some, but you can find you be able to find Womanhood. It's Womanhood, a trilogy of horror. Now we
Mhm.
instead of Womanhood a trilogy, but anywhere you could find that, and we hope to do that to premiere in Monsterpalooza. That's in May, at the end of May.
Well, glad to
Um,
share about the project. Is there anything that we missed that you want to make sure to share about it before we close out?
no, I had a really great time on the shoot. It was something I wish I'd done it sooner. And I know when you look back on your life, you know, um, and you look and you're like, God, I wish I'd done it, or I have a lot of regrets, mainly like I shouldn't have done that. That's really what I
Right.
shouldn't, instead of like I should have done, but I'm like I shouldn't have done that one. But I should have done this before, but again, I don't know if I had that wisdom that takes with
Yeah.
age, or to see it a little bit different, or that because I do think that as I hate to say it, but it's cliched, I know, and I hate trite and cliched, but as wisdom comes, with age, and it does, and you kind of just see things a little different, um, and you some things you don't take so seriously that normally I would have taken. Like my 9-year-old lead was had a nose, got so sick on the second day, and poor little thing, she came on to the, um, nosebleeds. I mean, it's all in our dailies. I mean, it's just, and I just said, we'll just not shoot anymore. But she was a troop. I couldn't believe it because I was ready to, but I didn't, I'm like, that's just going to happen. And then our last day, our 2 days before our mother shoot, our special effects person, she hurt her hip, couldn't walk, couldn't move. She was immobile. And I'm like, okay, that's just what happens, And when you're starting out on a filmmaker and you really, it's like you could fall apart. You could completely lose lose it. But here I just, that's life. We gotta, and we just, I said, I don't have time to sit. We'll just work it. And it really did work out on that. So in that way, I was very happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love the medium, and I'm so glad to get to talk with you about the way that it's come together, and looking forward to seeing the film and film series when it's out and into
I'm,
the
I'm
world.
looking forward to it too.
Yeah,
I got
I'm
a picture,
sure that
What?
editing process is a beast, is it not?
Oh yeah. That's all another thing, just that. But I have to find the time. It's just been so crazy. But that's fine. That's life, But it will
It
turn
is.
out, and I look forward to showing it.
Yeah. Well, glad to share this, and certainly glad to have you back anytime to talk about projects as they come to be.
All right. Thank you, Jason.